Here. Sit up straight.
All right, you ready? Okay. I would like to start the City Council of Yachats work session of Monday, the 29th of September. Remind the councilors that this is a work session, so no final votes can be taken. It's for discussion and understanding. So, City Manager Price, would you kick us off with this?
Absolutely. So during our September City Council meeting, we heard a report from West Tech Engineering on their findings from the property, the Festera property we have been looking at a potential option for a new reservoir build and additional housing that we had hoped for middle income housing, as that was the grand vision for that property. And okay. Thank you. Okay. So agreed upon with the property owner was that this feasibility work needed to be done. We all agreed that we did not know if this was the location, but it looked like a good location to at least investigate. And that investigation included a geotechnical investigation and report with the drilling down to see how far it would be to hit bedrock, and if the site was suitable to build 1 million or 1.5 million gallon reservoir on. We heard that report from the engineer last is it 2 weeks? Last 2 weeks ago now, and since then, our city team has been spending that time looking at alternate locations that were also part of that report. We had a handful of sites that were identified on the 220-foot elevation, which is that magic line for our current water system. He also went out of the box and took a suggestion of on the top of the mountain where it's pretty flat as a suggested location too, with the understanding that would change how our water system is currently operating. It would require some additional pumping to get the water up to the top of the hill, and then also some slowing as it comes back down the hill. Some pressure, real pressure restriction would have to happen on that. So it didn't give us any good, direct, clear answers. It gave us a lot more questions, and that brings us here today to talk about that. Some of the questions we have information on. I don't know if it's what we're going to bring back to you is the deciding factor on anything or enough information on everything, but we're going to share with you what we've been able to bring together in the last couple weeks since getting that report. I've got Catherine, who's been doing a lot of work on the suggested properties, and Rick, who's been doing work on the water mechanics side of the suggested properties, along with what it would take to go on top and what do we need to do to stabilize our current location. We started looking outward when we got the report that the ground was unstable where our current water reservoir is, that the tank itself needed to have seismic restructuring. But then they found that the ground below was unstable. So that immediately we started looking outward. But as we've looked outward, it hasn't given us the exact answer. So I want to look a little bit more inward again and see what could happen in the property that we currently own and currently have a water system on. That doesn't meet some of the dreams that were partnered with this water system, with adding more water, hopes to have additional housing, and hopefully some city subsidized workforce housing, middle income housing, trying to expand what we don't have and meet that need at the same time we were meeting our water needs. So here we are today, just to dig back into this report in a work session type environment and hear what our city staff has found in the meantime. So I'd like to start with having Catherine come up and talk about the identified alternate locations. Catherine. City Planner Catherine Gunther. So in your packet, this morning, we added her notes, on the varying properties. She talked about Vistera, our first option. The second option was what felt like right from that presentation, the most attractive option was the Creekside. The third was a property on Hanley in the Blackstone neighborhood. And the fourth was south of the bridge. We pretty much initially just immediately thought that that wasn't the right idea, just because it was south of the bridge, and what we're trying to do is add water north of the bridge. But she did get all of the information on all of the properties that were listed as alternates, and then a couple of additionals. Yeah.
I want to get this out early
Yeah.
because it could change the or I get left out here. But my question is this, we've been talking about the magic 220 elevation line.
Right.
Because that's what pairs with the other tank. And my question is, it's a technical one, if anybody can answer it, be Rick. Seems you can solve any problem with enough money. And would moving off the 220-foot elevation, something lower and flatter and cheaper to build on, would whatever it takes to coordinate between that lower tank and our existing 220 tank, would that cost less than the millions of dollars we're talking about to build a 47-foot high wall? In other words, is it possible that that option, which was never considered, might be usable because it might be less expensive than the alternatives?
Yeah, well, like you said, enough money, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Engineers.
Rick, do you want to come up closer when you can maybe pull up a seat with Catherine there?
Yeah.
You'll be part of this conversation a lot. Sure.
Okay. Okay. Now I am. Yeah, enough money, we can do anything. Part of the problem is half of our towns above, like where you suggested to put it. So, it can be done, and I'm sure there's probably a piece of ground that's pretty nice. But then you're falling into increasing pipe sizes. Not an easy direct answer to say how complicated it is, because it's pretty complicated. But yes, it can be done. And with an additional, let's call it $1 million, the modifier system. And in the grand scheme of things, if we're spending 10 million for a reservoir and 4 million for a retaining wall, $1 million modification without all those issues makes sense.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. So, so 220, I get. What if it's, what are the incremental costs if we go to 240 or 200? Let's say within that range, you'd still have to pump if we went to 240, but it wouldn't be as much pumping, I assume.
So at 240, at 220 right now, it serves the south end of town.
Mhm.
They have like 95 pounds of pressure already. So if we go up another 20 feet, that's roughly another 10 PSI. So we probably have to put reducing restrictors, at least at the meter for each house. Because I already get a lot of complaints from the high pressure. I would love to have that kind of high pressure, but that can be done a little lower. Lower. there's some houses that are at the very top of our water thing, and they already have to have a helper pump to get it up. There's 20 pounds at their property line, but they're up here on a hill. And we can't sell water under,
Mhm.
so that would go down, 10 feet, 10 pounds. So there's. Like you said, enough money, enough thinking, you can do anything. Later on, when it's time, I got a little presentation. Different thinking outside the box.
Okay, that helps me bracket it, so that's great, okay.
Let's talk about the properties that were listed on the report as alternate locations to consider, and then we'll go to you to have you kind of do a presentation on where your brain's going with this now.
Yeah, so I just kind of went through the ones that West Tech had proposed as alternate sites. Didn't have a whole lot to say about Vistera because I think they've sort of exhausted that, except that I did notice that where they're proposing to put that tank, there's actually an easement there that benefits an adjoining property, so that site will either need permission of a neighbor or it's gonna need to be tweaked a little bit. So with all the space to choose it from up there, we kind of picked a bad spot. So it's egress and utilities for 12 acres to the south. So before they get too much further on very site-specific investigation, find out if the neighbor, Mr. Clausen, is aware that that's being proposed. Sort of an artifact of the original start project. But when they did the reconveyance and Lane Moore gave the property back to the neighbor, that easement stayed, it's permanent, because otherwise it leaves the Clausen property landlocked now. So I don't think there's any working around that, but so that's kind of more I had to say about this. The next site was oddly a residential lot, Creekside, which seemed like about at least a probable place to try to put this, since Creekside has really strict CCNRs and architectural guidelines, and they are intended to be enforced. Some other neighborhoods where maybe the board had already been broken at that. Creekside, we built one of 3 possible plans. They have a particular look and feel they're going for, and I don't think they're going to bend on the CC powers for a water tank. So, plus, our findings and conclusions on approval for that also had some things to say about how the property was used, specifically the common area would only be used for recreational facilities. So I was initially thinking there's some parts of the common area that might be suitable or certainly at the right elevation, but those have deed restrictions restricting them to open space, recreational use. So we'd kind of be breaking our own rule if we tried to undo that. The next one was 2 lots side by side on the lower end of Blackstone. So just as you come into Blackstone, off of 10th and Hanley, I know for a fact this property owners are starting to scheme on building. They plan to be here full time, so even if it were to work in Blackstone, I don't think they'd be particularly interested in selling, and it's sort of the most visible part of that subdivision. The Blackstone HOA, such as it is, they're in the process of looking hard at their CCNRs and wanting to streamline them. Talked to me a couple times about getting rid of a lot of them and just letting them be a code to work. But I don't think what they have in mind is a large water tank in the middle of the most visible neighborhood. So that was alternative number 2. The third was ironically Clemente Roca's property. I didn't elaborate much on that, except that I'm not convinced that there isn't language in our very own restrictive covenants that would make that kind of awkward. Since we just spent a lot of money to put that in its map of the state. And as you all have mentioned, south of the bridge is not ideal. The only one that addressed the possibility of multiple tanks as opposed to one large tank was site up on the flat part, very top of Horizon Hill. And that's kind of intriguing just because I too have questions if we opened up the possibility of that 721 foot elevation, I think it is. Obviously, when you get to the top of the hill instead of the face of the hill, possibility of finding some flat sites. Lot better chance of us finding a suitable location up there, but this one didn't seem to be it. One of the three lots is also in Blackstone, so we have the issue with CCRs there. One is on the Riggs property.
That was like 600.
Yeah,
Bit up.
yeah,
So
the
you have-
720 sounded fine to me, but I didn't know if that was for level of water actually in the
I think
tanks
that's-
once it's constructed, yeah. It's a little higher than the actual ground elevation there. But then again, I had the same questions of what's the. How much play is there in that unit for 220, can I be looking from 210 to 50 or 220 magic number? And I assume the same logic would apply at top if we're trying to keep it on level with consistent play. And I know there were some issues with the properties that are immediately adjacent to the tank that needed some extra oomph.
Yeah, there's a small water system up there. It's an on-demand water system because they're as high as the reservoir, so it's a pressure tank system that they use up there. And that's about built out.
Okay, so that could be beefed up to.
Well, you'd have to upgrade, yeah.
So that one it was interesting just because it was at that higher elevation. But the three lots chosen, I think, have been had issues with deed restrictions. The Riggs property, if anybody's not familiar, is that property just outside the city limits on the top of the hill. City has had some interest in it for years because it's a big part of our watershed. And it was logged and abandoned, kind of left a mess. And as a result, they have lost their small tract forest land deferral. There is some tax issues with the county. It's just got a lot of issues. And there hasn't been much success in contacting those people to discuss anything over the years, as far as I know. So the possibilities up there, but those three may be a fun bid. The cemetery came up quite a bit, just people saying it seemed like a good spot to explore. It took some digging to find one of the deeds for that. But it was gifted in two parts over the years to the nonprofit, it's the Yahats Memorial Park Association. And there's very specific language that says if it's used for anything other than cemetery purposes. Like the 1971 deed says it reverts to the guy who gave the gift, and the whole deal is off, so.
Is he still
That
alive?
would be problematic. I was trying to sort of say, can we rule out some of these, like, are there subdivisions that we can just take off the table? I think Creekside, yes. I think also the cemetery, because of those deed restrictions, that's a whole can of worms. Although it's too bad because there's a whole part of that where the bodies are not buried. I kind of thought maybe it had some potential for residential use in the future, but that doesn't look like an issue. And then I just threw in one because it's one that came to my attention about 2 years ago when a guy bought a lot that was actually accessed through the Eastman Road on that upper portion of the cemetery. And it's part of a very little known subdivision here in Yahats, the Powell Edition. And anytime somebody does a major partition or a subdivision, our code requires that we commit to bringing water and sewage to the property line. And there's a whole list of things that one is not supposed to do until that happens, like sell a lot. That didn't happen. The city took a letter from this guy saying, I promise I'll get this done in 2 years. That was 30 plus years ago. So we now have 3 of the lots up there, one of which just changed hands. The guy would like to build where we don't have any city water. So I'd actually talked to a couple of the owners in there who are still alive and kicking and have plans to build in this lifetime. And I think they would be agreeable to some discussion about this. There's a platted road that's 50 feet wide on the level that goes in from the end of Elk Mountain Road straight across the cemetery property into it hits that 220 foot line on the lower part of this 2 acre parcel. And there is some flat dirt in there. I actually had the privilege of talking around up there with the current owner. But, so that's just one possibility. I ran across the 220-foot contour line from the river to the city limits on the north. And there just aren't a whole lot of good options. It's right on the steepest part of the face of that hill. And if the goal is to find something flatter than Vistara, especially for a single larger tank. That's something else I was sort of intrigued by in the West Tech report. If we were looking at multiple smaller tanks and the smaller footprint, maybe there's some sites that would work. But for something of this diameter, there just aren't a lot of options. So I'll wait to hear what other regulations might unlock, and we'll see.
I guess I'll start with how it began at the original ordinance. Okay, so I got a hold of the engineer and he got a hold of the geotech engineer and they discussed, and I wanted to know how much it would cost to rehab that. And their answer didn't give a price, and I'll kind of go over what they said. Okay. The slope stability. The key concern of the slope stability is that it has a safety factor less than 1. And it's predicted to fail with that event. The second thing, okay, let's say you wanted to fix the ground. Okay, but you have to fix a lot more than what's under the reservoir. It spreads out quite far onto other people's properties and stuff that you have to stabilize. And while theoretically it can be done, the cost is skyrocketing. The time you figure things out and get neighbors to give you the okay to give up their property to stable. I'm not sure they'd like the ground stabilized, but it'd be inconvenient to say the least. And so so they can't give a cost estimate. They just know it would be much, much more expensive than the site. So that's that. To go on top of Blackstone to build a reservoir at the very top. I'm not sure how much the tank would cost, but we're looking at $3 million worth of infrastructure work to pump water to the top of the hill. And then pressure reduces on its way down the hill. If the site is nice, it doesn't cost a lot of money. $3 million isn't too bad, if you're saving 5 or 7. So when Bobby asked me to look at that, I'm gonna ask to share my screen. Okay, here. Nothing's working.
I had the same problem. To
Sharing screen.
just said, I just want to see. I thought you were looking Assessor's map.
Okay.
Since the red button's not an option.
This is it.
Okay, all right. Just one way from-
We're just zooming in. When we say 220 feet, it's not been clear to me. Is that bottom of the tank,
The very
middle?
bottom of where the digging is. So once they hit the hard band of rock, 220 feet.
So that could be a 25 or 30 foot difference from that contour line,
Mhm.
showing the existing grade.
Need to go down further, yeah.
So when Bobby asked me to try to come up with a price, what it would cost for the infrastructure to get up there to the top of the hill. Oh, so easy. Before I got here.
When nobody's watching you.
Trying to think of how you could get up there to the a reservoir on top of Blackstone. And so I was thinking we could go up the back side of it instead of all the streets and stuff. And so I started looking at the maps here and thinking of a pathway to there. And so right here is the water plant.
Mhm.
And we own this whole lot
Mhm.
is, I mean, it's 25 acres or something like that. And come up here, in the very, very corner is a flat piece of ground.
Ah.
220 feet-ish. So right here's the 220 foot line. These are 10 foot increments. So if you use this as the floor and benched into the side of the mountain, only looking at a 20 foot. And depending on how much. The tank, I think they said was 85 feet for a 1.5 million, 85 feet wide.
That sounds right.
37 books.
Okay, I'll show you. So I made this.
So this is our water tank property?
No, this is the water plant.
Water plant property. That's what I meant.
Okay, that turns out to be 132 feet wide. And then I thought, well, how do you get there?
Helicopter.
Because-
The gator.
Yeah, big gators.
Okay.
Yeah. You gotta keep it fun, yeah. Okay, this is the Edmonds property over here.
Hmm.
So what my theory is, to get there. Okay. We could get.
Hmm.
Follow the. Yeah, that's it. Right down here, follow along the side of the hill. And make a road. Was not climbing, it'd just be, an angle cut into the side, like you see in the water mountain roads. It's a nice short little jaunt. Possibly easy digging. And to build the infrastructure. All we gotta do is put a pipe down to the water plant up here. And we do the same. problem solved.
What if we move?
That's record time. So adjourn at 1:33.
Water,
I'm practicing next to you, man.
what if we move the water plant up there?
There's all sorts of possibilities. You know, we own that. We also, I'll show you, in case you don't know. Yeah.
That's all right, we have a trouble.
A useful tool, but it's not
Yeah.
user friendly.
Okay, so back to our property here at the water plant. We own the hillside next to the water plant on the east side too. But that is pretty darn steep. And gets tall real fast. So it's easy, if we wanted something that. Okay, it doesn't go, you'd have to put it up here. But when I zoomed up on all the topo lines, it's a lot more steeper than that side up, it's just.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
So we do have land, and you know. Hindsight's 20/20. You know, but I was saying, if I did this years. So. You know, when we first started dealing with land, property was free. It was a win-win situation for him, the city, and everybody involved. And then it evolved. And now, you know, I did the same thing you did. Asked, what's that to do? Then I started looking for a way up to the top of Blackstone. It's like, right there.
So you literally could, from tank right where your cursor is now. You could just bring it down to your house or wherever, and use all the existing infrastructure.
But
Yeah,
it,
it's better than that.
I mean, Salmon Creek runs down through there too.
Yeah, it's over, it's
On the backside.
right through here.
Yeah. So, we have to do some silt control, I'm assuming, and.
Oh, yeah, it would be, we would want to clear a lot. Of timber and stuff
It's pretty,
because of erosion.
yeah, it's already cut. I mean, there's nothing there in terms of trees and.
Further, yeah.
Oh, that's right, yeah, I'm thinking about his land, but this is our land.
Sorry. Yeah. We would only be eroding on our own property.
Mhm.
You know, we'd have to get permission from ourselves.
I have a question. It's on the way up to that place for the reservoir. Is there, without causing any damage to the land, I mean, per se, is there some space that we could build, maybe not as many of the housing things, but some housing?
Well, we're outside the city
You got
limits.
weird zoning challenges there.
Yeah, the water plant's outside the city limits.
Yeah, I realize that, but I didn't,
Yeah. I mean, that's why we're good. I mean, even south of town couldn't build. South side thing.
Well, it was timber commercial,
Yeah,
and it's really hard
And
to.
usually there's underlying residential zone, but they've chosen that timber overlay because they get the tax credit. But when you remove that, then there are some consequences, triggers payment on all the different.
so yeah, then even though it's our land, we couldn't do it for city.
No, I wouldn't say that. One is, can you click on identify up top?
Then can we expand the,
Click on the, what you can find policy, click on that zone. And then go to the R. In the screen.
Can
This
you-
will show you the breakdown of the zoning on that in school level. Good. So we do have RR2. Which is the county, it's county residential, meaning a minimum of 2 acres per home site. So
so you
there's,
could build it. I made a change.
But then, because we own a weird.
Pretty.
We've got that market forest land. It's 26 acres of it. And that's not so much a zoning designation as a property tax overlay. So if you commit to that, you pay taxes on the value of it as timberland rather than residential. And your tax, well, you don't, but so it surprised me that the city, when I was looking at the Edmonds property and I saw, oh, they had that same timberland designation, and I'm like, is that gonna be a problem for us if we acquire that? And then I realized we've been sitting on that for years anyway with the current property, and apparently it's not a problem. But when you take it out of that forest land designation, you trigger payment on the deferred taxes in the past, so there's a upfront cost right there.
I understand what you're saying.
See where it's got the breakdown mark, so with 1 acre that's, we call commercial, that's your,
That's
that's
right.
just fine. And then they've got market forest land, is the remaining 20, almost 27 acres. So that's where we could potentially have home sites under this rural residential zoning. But right now it has this timberland, forest land overlay, which is.
So you're saying only we could do it, but we would owe back tax.
Yeah, since we don't pay taxes, I don't know how it works.
Oh, okay.
My concern when we acquired the Edmonds property was that just the acquisition was gonna trigger something that we weren't prepared for. And then I thought, oh, we've already got an example, we've already done that. But so if that were to go away and we reverted just to the underlying RR2 zoning, then there could be something that could be done there. So a lot of the other timberland around us is zone TC, or timber conservation. And that's the one that's really tough. I don't know if you've read about Linda Hetzler struggle. Because that's controlled at the state level. And so timber conservation or agricultural conservation was designed to keep us from turning valuable timber or agricultural into residential subdivisions. So Salem really won't budge on that. In this case, it's different. The question is, could we get a high enough density there that it's active
Right, that's.
on the steep slopes?
For,
Or even
But you
near
could-
the road, so
Yeah.
you're.
but if we did want to, would be. Can we just do another 1 acre?
Commercial?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then we have a remaining, 20, so we potentially have 13 2-acre lots if we wanted to explore that possibility.
Yeah.
And obviously water, we can get there, because that is the challenge up there, ironically, that was in that problem.
Yeah.
How long of a distance from the Edmonds property to that location is it? How long of a road would we have to make to access
Yeah, I
the?
was wondering where Edmonds Road ends, you can see the switch back.
Yeah. Okay,
There it is.
Not very far. So Catherine, can we extend the urban growth boundary if it's not contiguous?
That, normally I'd say no, but then you look at Walport, they've done it all, they've done it all over the place. The problem there is that we just finished that buildable lands inventory. And the results of that is that we have enough to work with in the city limits. That's what determines when you can start saying it's time for us to grow out.
There was,
But there was a one.
right,
Yeah, so I wouldn't rule it out.
yeah,
And the airport has funny little, they've got.
yeah, that's it. I'm not sure if that period expired or not, or if it was very specific for certain cities. Right, right.
With it, so, but I was sort of watching what other people did with it. My guess is that it's not going to be the only one we see. So there was sort of a one-time opportunity to extend your urban growth boundary, which is step number one in annexing something to the city. And this would be a logical place to do that. So you say that's the direction we're headed. You have a slightly different set of rules in the urban growth boundary than we do in the city limits. But we're moving towards making it a part of the city. And so not allowing anything that would ultimately conflict with it being like the rest of us, if you will. But even without, I mean, there's nothing that says we can't create housing outside the city limits for, I don't see our problem.
Mhm.
And
Maybe it's
city
not the
limit,
game type setup and.
which is why the 2 acre minimum is that they're assuming you don't have a city. limit.
I'm looking at the map, it looks pretty steep.
Well, that's the problem that you couldn't get created with that zoning. So if that were in the city limits, we'd be looking at some kind of planned development.
Hmm.
Where you can use the density of the underlying zone, but you don't have to create the standard lot size.
Mhm.
So you can say, I'm gonna make these tiny little 0 lot line lots where my house basically fills up the entire lot. And then in exchange for that, I'm gonna dedicate all this open space. So the ratio built up to ocean space remains, open space remains the same. So you could take that steep hillside and say, that's gonna be the open space, and I'm gonna concentrate all the residential units on the flattest spot. The RR2 zoning doesn't have that kind of flexibility.
Yeah.
I have no idea what a tweak to that zoning would involve.
Yeah. I mean,
So it does not like 1 house, 2 acres, 1 house, 2 acres, 1 house, 2 acres. You could put all of the houses and then all of the acreage is.
26
space.
acres, and so I'm allowed 13 houses on that. But I
Mhm.
wanna put all the 13 houses down here and then have all the rest as open
Mhm,
space, so I'm not
mhm.
gonna violate the density of the
Mhm.
zone, and that's what our plan unit meant. Code lets us do here in the
Mhm.
city, so Facera is a good example of that,
Mhm.
that when it was proposed on 22 acres with plus townhomes, they were all clustered down by the highway with that hillside.
Which makes more sense also for middle income, because then you don't charge as much.
Yeah, it's definitely, but
you know,
since I didn't get a preview of this like amazing show, I haven't given this any thought. But I would love to play like the possibilities.
Well, honestly was shocked, because I thought I should have seen it sooner. You know, but.
I don't know how you missed it, and it's squiggly on.
I get, call me skeptical. But it looks, I think the idea of a tank there makes a heck of a lot of sense. But I'm not sure we're gonna see a whole lot of housing by the time you put a tank in.
I don't think the two need to be linked in any way.
Yeah,
To me, it makes perfect sense to me. It's flatter than Vistara. There's no major replanting of all.
yeah,
So I'd say that's a separate decision, and then, pardon me if I get excited about housing.
Yeah. well,
But since
there,
we're not purchasing the land, we already own it.
yeah,
Yeah, we can play with that
I
for
mean,
years to come.
Yeah,
You
well,
didn't
and
know.
also I think I was just thinking that I think probably a lot of people were getting excited about that possibility, and if we could avoid taking it totally off the table, it would be nice.
Mhm. I don't think we have to stop looking as an option. It just might be not like the direct correlation that we were hoping for. One thing I really liked about that conversation that we were having is that it was a really good recipe for funding
Mhm.
that's out there. And there's just the two of them goes together so symbiotically right now with what's needed in our state and in our county and our city. But we also are facing a real water problem, number one, in safety, with having that slope stability be less than 1.
And
And money. So I don't think we have to stop that conversation. I just think maybe it doesn't end up together. I don't know.
So if we're looking at this property for the reservoir, we'll have to do the same thing, build a road, have the geotech go out, but we don't have to have permission.
Mhm.
And then we'll have to pay for it ourselves because that one grant won't be usable.
Yeah,
Or will it if we
Yeah.
think we might, well, 'cause there's housing attached to that grant, right? Housing.
they may not.
The grant that we have was for housing infrastructure, like.
so why don't we keep housing in the language?
When we go, or is there any grant money left over from that?
That should be pretty darn close. Terry, I just talked to Terry this morning, told him to send him a bill that I warned you.
Yeah.
So. when
So there might not
he gets
even-
bill, we'll know.
And that was for the road clearing and then,
Cleanup.
the cleanup of it. Mhm, mhm.
So I was just thinking of that, let's say you said, Rick, let's check into that. I could get the surveying done. A road nice, make it as easy of a road as possible. And then hire Terry again in the spring, after it dries up a little bit. And we'll just rinse and repeat that side.
If we were to do that, if that were the plan, what obligation and money are we still with the current?
With Lane?
So you're saying how much money it would cost?
No, what's.
No, with our current,
Oh, okay, we got one more bill probably coming in. The Geotech was 43. Something like that. And I'm pretty sure Terry's bill is gonna be close. They took out $700 in material. And, did some engineering. So we're probably right at that $100,000 mark right now.
and the percentage of, or not percentage, but the report is indicating things that would clear us from that agreement?
With Lane.
No question.
Okay.
And we would get our earnest money back, right?
We haven't put any down.
I thought we did.
And just, if we're gonna attach housing to it, or well, it's grant cycle coming up. There might be another round, this year.
Well, and maybe if we do include housing with this, we can, while we're building the road and doing geotech, we can also be like, how could we build up here? Include that with the grant and do more investigating for housing. Because we didn't really do that so much with this Lane property.
I know it down by the Reedy Creek itself, Salmon Creek. It's prone to slides and stuff in there because it's real wet. But up top, I've been up top before, when they did all the logging. And it dries out real fast up there. But down the gorge of the creek, it's a little soft.
We wouldn't want to do anything that would affect our water coming
No.
from all of those trees in the ground and being protected and, a lot of what keeps us.
Corner like that.
Mhm.
Damn, it's just kind of hard to tell in that corner.
Yeah, and I think that's a little problematic too, I'm looking at the LiDAR version of it.
Yeah, lighter.
You could,
It looks to me that
Oh, there we go.
yeah, I know, wow.
isn't he monitoring?
That looks like a good spot.
It is helpful.
It's only the surface, so it's not showing you anything under the surface, but. I think that the 220 spot looks like a really intriguing option. The only other buildable areas I see though are below that. We'd have to be really careful about polluting our own water. Polluting your own water is not a good idea. Just storm runoff and everything would be mitigating that would
Up
be.
there where we're at for the tank, you're not talking about housing,
Right.
let's say during construction, you got.
What's the dark part? Is that
It's-
less steep or more steep?
It's down deeper. 327 feet of duff and material and trees in between.
What was your comment, Barry? You started saying something.
just many things have been said today that made me think we need, I think, a more ready access to our attorney. Okay, in other words, and now I know some of this is probably off the table, but when we're talking about the other plots that Catherine identified. And, well, there's a, condition on the deed about the cemetery. And then, there's a problem with the, access road over here. All of those in my mind are legal questions that may be resolvable. And the one, and I am totally unable to, I can ask the question, I cannot answer it. But eminent domain. Eminent domain is our right as a municipality to take over property and pay for it, and it's messy, it's expensive, and it probably isn't $10 million. My instinct is that eminent domain isn't simply buying a piece of property, it could be taking over an easement if we need one. So that there are a lot of questions that I would like to bounce off the attorney. And I'm sure there's some in this, well, as much as I like this idea, I am sure that some of those questions would be, some of those issues we might want to run by the attorney. So that's,
Yeah, I did put all of these questions out to him already. And eminent domain was not something that he had suggested as an option, but he, looking at each of the different properties and each of the different kind of restrictions that come with them seem to be more road bumps, but like the CCR one for Blackstone, he said that it could, we could go to that home association and have them amended, and to look at the bigger picture of the CCRs. The cemetery property, he said in the first sentence, makes him nervous. No cemetery taken. No, he said that in his experience, deed restrictions are very common for cemetery property, and that ORS Chapter 97 regulates cemeteries and provides a lot of limitations and regulations on cemetery lease. So he seemed to be steering us away from those, but did say that he suspects money talks and CCRs can be amended.
yeah, it's, in my mind, it's all a question of if we're spending more than we would have to spend, sometimes legal fees save money in construction.
So I put links to every document supporting those various things. So there are links to the deeds, there are links to the CCNRs, with the idea that if the city attorney were to review it, my time's cheaper than his is, and then he would have the corresponding whatever he needed to look at. So in there, and that should save him money. But I think because the deed restrictions on the cemetery, the lower ones, I think it's kind of it almost doesn't matter if there's a deed restriction or not, unless we want to get into moving bodies. But there's quite a bit of property east of that that's completely untouched, where, it might be worth exploring, but I don't think we want to dig people up.
And you have a willing seller.
And then we gotta put them somewhere else.
And I think I would add that we would have a willing seller in the cemetery board.
Yeah, but there's
versus-
some concerns about that as well. It's a self-constituted board, and I shared this and asked Bobby to pass this on to. So everybody who was on the board of the Younts Memorial Park Association died. And if you go back and look at their reports to the Secretary of State every year. They just would cross off, write deceased and write poor Barbara Mead's name in that position until she was the last one standing. And in 2024, Barbara Mead died. And so there was nobody left. So a group of local folks got together and basically reconstituted the board. And I think Ross said he's not concerned, I mean, he's not totally sure about the legality of that either. So the question is, do they have legal right to enter into an agreement with the city? I'm not sure. I've never seen anything quite like it, but it could just as easily, Rick and I could have gotten there first and said, we're gonna be the new board of the cemetery.
Mhm.
So if that was the direction we wanted to go, we would have to get their nonprofit specialist legal team working on that reconstitution of that for
Yeah,
us, which he just scratched the surface of it from his knowledge
Yeah.
of, but we would need to.
It's always been a nonprofit. If the city were to buy a chunk of that property, we know that this nonprofit is prepared to receive that money in a way that
Mhm.
it just would make me very nervous. And I think everybody means well. I think it was nice that people stepped up when
Yeah.
nobody was maintaining that place, but then if we start talking about entering into a real estate
Dude,
purchase,
we must have a bank account though or something.
I don't know,
Oh, it's
but
okay.
literally the registered agent, the president, the secretary,
Mhm. All
they
done.
just chose a new registered agent. And when you read the bylaws, those people are supposed to be appointed by the existing board, and there was no existing board, so it's just unclear.
Our attorney did suggest that if we wanted to go that way, though, that we do have their specialty nonprofit attorneys looking really deeply into it. Mhm.
Well, isn't it, I didn't mean to open up all those cans of worms because to me, Rick's new discovery is far and away the most interesting thing here.
Mhm.
And so do we want to, are we able to spend some money on finding out the physical feasibility, no geotech. I mean, that's when you have something that seems to be in the right place in a property that we already own. I don't know how we can pass that by without, if we have to rule it out, I want to rule it out, say, no, it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
But,
Well, first thing would be the surveying, and that's not very expensive. And then,
Especially,
yeah, and then, we're real close to the new budget year by the time we're able to go up there.
We're,
So it could be planned out.
I mean, we're not spending the 750, if we would be passing on the $750,000 that we have in the budget.
So then there would be that we could start using to explore if it moved
Mhm.
faster than next year's budget.
But if this doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be more expensive than the current property we're looking at, we've lost out on that opportunity. Unless he's still hungry by the time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I know, he showed drawings of, all this housing on there. From what the engineer is saying to us, that housing is not gonna be cheap.
No.
Even if it's, right, even if, middle income or any other kind of housing is gonna be expensive in that location.
That's, I was wondering why, maybe that's why he didn't pursue building there.
Well, that somebody, I've heard that, if it were easy, he would have done it.
Yeah.
Does that relate to why Whiteback was not wanting that property?
Sorry, I sat in
Go
on
for it.
that one.
Yeah.
I sat in on that one. Yeah, they weren't opposed to that. They weren't particularly excited, or the board wasn't particularly excited about relocating at all. But they were just kind of like.
I thought there were problems with the property too.
I mean, we didn't really get that far in the discussions then. But it was the same kind of win-win situation that the city would spend some money punching the road in, and then Lane would be able to build some exchange for the site, or in that case, the Wi-Fi facility. But the Wi-Fi board wasn't jumping up and down.
I mean, there's some from my naive perspective, there's some buildable lots on the lower portion now where we have the road in. If we walk away, he may say, I can come in here and put some affordable housing in. I wish he were willing to consider workforce housing, middle housing, because there's new programs that were not available when he was doing Fistera and those sorts of things, is middle income revolving loan funding. But his specialty is affordable housing. So if we walk away, he may say, well, now I have a road, at least the cut-in road, and my ideas are more workable, and he would want to work, he'd come to the city, I'm assuming.
Will we have water for there?
Well, we'd have to put water into there, and that would be, you know, they probably, I don't know how you absorb the water costs. But yeah, normally it would be a system development fee of $18,000 per lot. So he might want that waived, and then we'd put the water in, or he'd pay for the water being installed. I mean, there's all kinds of directions that now that there's a road in that he could go. So I guess if we walk away, I don't see it as zero housing, but I based again on what the engineer said, I don't see it as the kind of amount of housing that he had earlier predicted, unless he's got better engineering people than Westech is giving us information on.
Yeah, I think it was all townhouses all bunched up together.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of a topo line, you know, trying to follow that.
Yeah, from what the engineer was telling us that because my question to the engineer was, well, you got all this dirt that you're taking out, can't you just flatten out some of the steep parts? And she said, well, you're still gonna have these really tall retaining walls. And if I remember right, Lane had said that also, that
Yeah.
there's
I
gonna be.
went back and looked to see it, because there've been 8 or 9 modifications to the Fistera Townhouse plan development.
Right.
As I looked through that when this conversation first started, to see if he ever got to the point where we had useful geotechnical engineering from the proposed townhouse project. And it was mostly still drawing lines on paper.
Mhm.
So I don't think we got into that depth of real site specific, what does that hillside look like? But you're right, the whole plan was to cluster the townhouses as close as possible
Yeah.
to the highway and leave that steeper slope as the open space.
I remember those, that there were
roads.
there was a road and townhouses all the way up to the top.
That easement that I was mentioning, then that continued over several, to go with diversity, we had Integrity Lane and it was gonna be, yeah, it was interesting.
And that, Mr. Clausen, is it?
Yeah,
He wrote to us and offered us his property also. Is that, where are we at with that? Thinking about that, is that there is a 220,
Yeah,
he's literally feet, so that easement that I mentioned, that benefits him,
yeah.
and that runs sort of right along their shared property line.
Mhm.
So where that proposed tank is now is literally feet from Clayton's property at the same elevation.
And so we're still dealing with that steepness and $3 million retaining wall and everything. And that's what a lot of the alternate properties are, is they're still pretty steep, where this one is the only one that's
And that's
flat.
kind of the problem with that 220 number in the city, is you run along the face of that hillside
Yeah.
and there just isn't much. I mean, this is remarkable.
Yeah,
So
so it's, this little spot right there, that's my Renal Reservoir. We built that, when I first got here, and it had rock. The type of rock you can dig. Okay,
No, it sounds like I'm gonna ask what my heart manager is going on.
So I'm sorry, Rick, you were saying the tank that's on
Yeah, right there.
where the road cuts back?
Yeah, we put that in right after I got here
Okay.
and it was rocky, but it was the type of, it was fractured rock.
Mhm.
So you could take one of those little vibrate drill things. That's all.
Hmm.
Yes. But you know, you never know what's on that. for.
Right. Let's, go ahead.
Well, we have one deadline coming up, and I believe it's in November.
Yes.
And that's now. Is there any chance, now, personally, I'm thinking that it's just going to be more expensive that ought to be an alternative that's less expensive, and to me, that's the way to go. But, so I don't see a lot of hope for that, but can we approach Lane and ask for an extension of the period? And we got a good reason, because we got surprised late in the game with the cost.
Well,
And the geotech report.
yes, and but Rick is thinking that the geotech for this new site would not be done until spring. So that's a long extension.
Well, I don't wanna.
Yeah.
I don't wanna go to Lane and say,
No.
give us more time because there's another place we
Well,
like
no,
better.
no, we don't have to tell Lane that, but if we're asked for an extension. But no, what I'm saying, we're not gonna know if this property will work for us until spring. And so are you saying that we ask for that long of an extension?
We ask for whatever extension we can, just to keep our options open. And if he hasn't got anything else to do with the property,
Mhm.
And it also lets them know that we're still interested.
Right.
yeah, so doesn't cost anything to see if we can get an extension.
We can probably get. We get it surveyed, the whole road. You don't think you can do any digging from here on out?
Well, the
Probably
weather,
booked.
there is good weather coming up, but this next week,
Yeah, terrible.
it would be really, it would cost more to excavate it for sure.
Yeah. And
But Terry's a gifted operator, so, but he wanted to wait till spring on this site.
Spring meaning what month?
When it quits raining and the ground starts to go the right direction.
June?
May,
I think
June.
it was about June when we cut, yeah.
Yeah.
too bad we can't come in from the top to get down there, cause that's all cleared. I mean, we could, like you say, finding rigs would be almost impossible.
Yeah, I noticed he's added some additional LLCs since the last time. They all point back to Boise, but.
Yeah, but nobody answers the phone there.
Yeah.
He pays his taxes, though, so the address, somebody's checking the
Somebody
phone
said,
stuff.
you know, we're just cheating.
Yeah. But I tend to agree with Barry. I think that our look at the first choice has challenges that will make it extremely expensive and difficult. And also I should say, it also is likely not to give us the housing that we had hoped. Therefore, I would suggest that we ask for an extension while we explore another alternative that is likely to be water tank only, but with the possibility of some housing in the future. That'd be kind of where I'm thinking that I'm going on this. And if Lane says, no, I'm gonna build, I want that property and I'm gonna build because you guys made me this beautiful road,
So be it.
so be it. I mean, we don't lose because he's gonna build a house.
Right, but if the grants are more geared to the housing and water tank together, for us to put in for another grant to possibly pay for where we have the land already, I would say, don't say, well, I mean, go in with the mission of the water tank and housing. And like you said, and look at it, and I mean, that's no obligation that we do it now or ever, but it's like, that's our mission that we're going in with.
Mm.
For the grants.
Yeah.
No downside,
Hmm,
no downside.
right, but I would make sure that it's not just like an and maybe housing, it would be like, we're going in there for water tank and house.
I mean, just, really looking in the future, we'd have a road that was a construction road. Would it be drivable we put in fourplexes?
Fire protection is first thing that comes to
Oh,
mind.
okay.
Yeah.
Cause you are nestled in the woods there.
Obviously, we could get a hydrant up there, but could we get an aging
Fire
fire
truck
truck
up
up
there.
there?
Mm,
Yeah,
Well,
so
just
we
don't-
have to be thinking with that,
Yeah,
and then there are new standards, even some of the places that wire FPD goes willingly now. Technically don't meet the current code as far as vehicular accessibility.
yeah, there's a hairpin corner on the Edmonds property.
Yeah. I wonder if we could work on that, widen it a little bit.
But if we found out that we wanna build there, we could. Figure out the best way to build a nice smooth line.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's all into owners, it's just we, especially in the counties, yeah.
But also if we had the intention on that property of housing some of our current utilities, I mean, like some of your items that are down here, needing to be up there. Yeah, if some of those could have something that had some water facility thing for a fire truck, that it could park right where we were gonna park all the other stuff.
You get plenty of flow.
Well, I guess I use the other alternative is on-site storage for fire suppression, and we certainly would have on-site storage.
Well, so I don't want to drag this out anymore, but I would say this is what we pursue. That we move forward with this, and as you suggest, hopefully with some housing or with the plan to put some housing in. That we have to be upfront with Wayne. We're not
All right.
trying to cover anything, but that it just is becoming too expensive for us to put the kind of infrastructure tank that we need up there. So we need to look at other piece of property.
And Rick, you said the diameter seemed to be right for 1.5 million,
Yeah,
okay? If the ground is good enough.
if it's good enough. Yeah, it may need flat out or benched or,
Mhm.
we'll have to find that out.
Yeah,
But yeah, the flat spot that I identified, it was 130 feet wide.
That 12 to 20 foot buffer that they showed around it, is that regardless of the slope? I wasn't looking at that
Yeah, you
before.
gotta be able to drive around the tank to build
Seems to
and to fix it.
it.
yeah. Bobby, what do you think?
I mean, I think it seems like the most viable option for us to explore. I thank you for finding that as an option. Yeah, I think that it doesn't hurt to reach out and ask Lane if he's interested in extending the agreement with us, that we're still interested, but we are exploring other options. This has been proven to be quite expensive of a build, and we have another piece, the property that has come up that's on the right elevation that we would like to explore also before we commit. But then if he chooses to not, that's okay too, because we have another option to explore. We do have the $750,000 that we have set aside that would still be, we could still utilize for this if we needed to. The surveyor got back to us pretty quick last time when we looked to do a road up here. I think we could get moving pretty quick on that part of it, and then it would be holding off until Thistles felt they could get up there to clear, and then another West Tech. So altogether, that was about $100,000 investigation. I think we can do that as well here.
Are the trees marketable? Can we defray our costs?
Well, we didn't market the tree, we could have marketed the trees that we cut in Plains, but it was only like one. It wasn't worth the company's time.
Probably.
So we donated them to Midcoast Watershed to use for some of their creek restoration projects.
Mary Ellen, you've been quiet.
I mean, we had to look for another alternative. There's no doubt in my mind. I went over everything this morning and it's clear that we need some other options. And I think all those that have been suggested, we need to go forward and see what we can do. So. I think we're on the right road.
And I would really like to be thinking about what are the components of the water plant that we can move out of the tsunami zone.
Yeah, that would be
That's-
actually,
That's my ultimate goal is,
that would be-
get that plant off of 46 feet
It
above sea
wouldn't
level.
change, the beautiful thing about that is I would pump to the reservoir. It would be like a giant clear well.
Oh,
So moving the plant up by the reservoir. It's so simple. All the infrastructure for the water. Is just putting the plant beside the reservoir.
Is there enough land to put the plant by the reservoir?
Flat, yeah, we got 26 acres, but finding.
Flat, I mean, that flat part that you,
We'll see, I hate to talk.
Yeah, it's pure conjecture. But even if it were on the Edmonds property, we have a road that we can run the pipes up the
Yeah.
road. I'm trying to think strategically, long-term, moving infrastructure out of tsunami is kind of go.
That whole area is so easy on our infrastructure to make these moves. A lot of places you move a plant, the only place to do it is. Say a little bit outside the city limits or something. You got all that piping and pump stations. Everything to get it where you
So
go.
buying the Edmonds property was a good thing.
that was a good decision.
Yes. Mine property next to your water plant is a
So-
good idea. Okay, so I think that we can't make a decision. And do we need to schedule another meeting? When will we have time before November? When does
November 5th would be
so,
that's October, so we have an October meeting.
yes,
Scheduled
yeah.
meeting.
Okay, so is that can work for everybody? So vote on this in October. You can file your vote with us now.
Oh, I can do that. Maybe Ireland has a way for me to zoom in.
I taught classes to the Irish. They were much more advanced in the internet than we were.
Yeah, so I'll hold off then because we can't make a vote to.
You can still approach him.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see that. We haven't made a decision, but we can get his sense. Even if we don't build, I think that if he sees use for housing, I would encourage it. I know he's just finishing up his Florence projects and they were very well received.
Oh.
50-person,
Mhm.
Wow,
50-person childcare center there. And,
nice.
a lot of affordable housing
That's
with
great.
it. So no, he's done a lot of work in our greater community, and I appreciate that. If he sees an opportunity here that we don't see, it'd be great. Okay.
If we took, if the site above the water treatment plant worked. And Rick's second suggestion is maybe even move the water treatment plant up right next to the tank. Then the old plant could be turned into affordable housing. With a swimming pool in the backyard.
Take a look at what would be involved in kind of tweaking the zoning. I don't even know if this county, not city, I'm not sure what they have that would be equivalent. Like our planning development, I'm sure they have it, where we could concentrate in somewhere. We also keep bringing up the Edmonds property, I mean, that's been available for housing right along too.
Yeah.
We can kind of fold that in if we're looking at that whole area.
Can the water reservoir go on the Edmonds property? What's the 150?
Yeah, and I think the preliminary geology was that it's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe put two smaller tanks or something. And that property really goes up steeply. So there's the bench that we're utilizing, but then from there, it's quite steep. And it's steeper than the property we're looking at. Having walked it. Okay, so I think we have some thoughts, ready to move forward. Well, I was gonna say, Catherine, the county is vested in developing more housing too, so I think they'd be willing to work with us.
Yeah, and I've talked with some folks that we sort of had this line at the city limits that we. We're trying to
Yeah.
tackle. The problem, when truthfully, some of our best options for workforce housing are probably in the county, not in the city, just because of the relative cost of the dirt.
Yeah.
See an opportunity for something a little collaborative here.
Mhm. Okay, all right, well, I think we have kind of talked this over to death. But I think we've come to some reasonable understanding of where we will probably go in our next meeting. So if there's no objections, I will adjourn our work